Today I'm going to talk about side planks and how that's an amazing exercise if you have diastasis recti or what we call ab separation. If you have a mom pooch, and how I separate diastasis recti from mom pooch, sometimes people don't have ab separation. If you don't know what I'm talking about with diastasis recti or ab separation, check out my other YouTube videos. I have a bunch that explain that. But in short, it's just where the ab muscles at the midline have separated from each other, that connective tissue that connects the abdominal muscles at the midline, that tissue is stretched out, and we call that diastasis recti. How do you know if you have that? Very quickly, if you lean back, you look down, and you see bulging coming up through your midline, that's diastasis recti. Okay, so the exercises that I share on a lot of my platforms is really helpful for those who have that condition. But let's say you don't have that. Let's say you lean back, you look down, and you don't see any midline bulging. Let's say you're doing a sit-up, you look down, you don't see midline bulging. However, if you lean back, or let's say you are doing a sit-up and you can't keep your abs flat while doing it and your six-pack muscles are bulging out, that is what I call a mom pooch. If you have a kind of still look pregnant, which I struggle with for years, if you still look pregnant and when you lean back or do a sit-up, you can't keep your abs flat, I call that a mom pooch, even if you don't have diastasis recti. So the exercises that I share are both for diastasis recti and also for that mom pooch, even if you don't have ab separation. Now, rib flare. Rib flare is where your ribs are wider than 90-degree angle. So if you get a book, something with a 90-degree angle, you stick it there, and if that's about the size of the angle of your ribs, then you're good, okay? If you have a rib cage angle that's wider than that, then we call that a rib flare. Or if your ribs flare forward, possibly because of posture, you also have a rib flare. So you have a rib flare that can come out forward. You can also have a rib flare that comes out to the side. So side planks are great for all that, and that's what I want to talk about today. So planks, we know, are great core exercise in general, but for those of us who have a mom pooch where our abs don't stay flat when we do a sit-up, or we have diastasis recti, we get that midline bulging when we do a sit-up, planks aren't always the best thing if we aren't strong enough for it yet. How do you know if you're not strong enough for a regular plank? When you do a plank, if you see your abs bulging down or your midline bulging down, you can't hold it up. You look down and you see bulging, then you may not be ready for a plank yet, a full frontal plank. And it's a great core exercise that helps engage your core, but it's too much because you're not strong enough to keep everything in, because it's just all that front loading from leaning forward like this. We're front loading, and it's a lot going down this way. So that can actually work against us and cause our mom pooch to be worse, our diastasis recti to be worse. So a great alternative for that is the side plank, because you're still loading your core, but you don't have that front loading going on. So you're loading it enough to challenge it and help tighten up the diastasis recti, tighten up the mom pooch, but it's not so much that it's going to make it worse. And so that's why I wanted to share this exercise with you, the side plank, because it's super helpful for all of those and for rib flare as well, okay? But you want to make sure you're doing it properly so that you can get the most out of the exercise and not cause any more issues with your core, okay? So let's troubleshoot. Now that we've kind of talked about those things, let's troubleshoot how to do a side plank properly. Now, in my 8-week core challenge, which is my complete core rehab program, I do this exercise. This is a main part of the program, the side plank. And what we'll do with our moms and those who have a weak core especially is start you off on an easier level. So we're not going to just go straight into the side plank like this. We're going to start you off easier so that we can make sure you're doing it properly and you're getting the most out of it, okay? So you want to elevate yourself higher so that you can really kind of offload some of that weight. So the higher you elevate yourself with the side plank, the easier it will be. So for my ladies, usually I use a chair. You can use a stool or something pretty high, but for the purpose of this video, so I don't go out of the frame, I'm just going to use this little stool. But you can use a bar stool, whatever it is. The higher you elevate yourself, the easier it will be, which will be really good so you can really get the form down that I'm going to show you right now and get the most out of the exercise. And as it gets easier, like in my 8-week core challenge, we work our way down to the floor over an 8-week period. Okay, so there are just a few main things that you want to get right if you're going to if you want the side plank to really work for you. Okay, and the first thing, I'll start from the top of the body. The first thing that I want you to consider is when you are in that side plank, and this is even easier. In my program, the 8-week core challenge, we start off with a leg in front because it helps to just kind of offload the hips a little bit. So we're going to do this just to kind of get you started and get you in stage 1, okay? But the first thing I want you to pay attention to is where your shoulder is. You don't want it sagging down. You really want to lift up this shoulder and make sure it's pretty straight. And that's going to make a world of a difference, and it's really going to help you get the most out of this because you're using your serratus anterior. I've talked about that a couple videos back. If you missed that, that's here on Facebook. It's on YouTube as well. Wherever you're viewing this, you should be able to find it. Where I talk about the serratus anterior, there are muscles in the back that tie to the front, and they really help with diastasis recti and pulling that tissue nice and taut, okay? And that's the same muscle that's going to help you push up here. So that's why this is a wonderful exercise. It's going to get everything you need to really help with diastasis recti and the mom pooch, okay? So step 1, when you're in that side plank, you want to make sure that you're not sagging down like this. So whether you're on your elbow or whether you're on your arm, you don't want to do this. You want to push up, okay? Push up. So that's step 1. Another thing you want to make sure is you want to make sure you don't have a twist here. Your ribs and your pelvis should be in alignment, but not twisted, okay? As soon as you twist, you're not using your core as much as you're using your back. So let's just say I'm here. Let me tuck this in so you can kind of see better. All right. So here, if I am in a side plank and I'm like this, I'm using my back, not my core as much, okay? So you want to make sure that your ribs and your pelvis are facing the same way. You don't want your ribs facing the ceiling and your hips facing the floor, all right? And that sometimes can happen. We've got this or we've got this, all right? So you want to make sure that your hips and your pelvis are facing the same direction, all right? And that's going to really help you engage your core properly. Another thing you want to make sure is you are lengthening. So lengthen your head forward. You don't want to have forward head posture. You're not going to use your core ideally, optimally the way you need to, okay? And what else? So foot placement. Foot placement, this is easier than this, and this is easier than this, okay? So you just want to stay at your level. Don't try to push yourself beyond your level, because if you're not doing the move properly, you're not going to get the best out of it. So with that, and how this relates to rib cage, because so when you're doing this, again, it's a very great core loading exercise without front loading, so you're not making anything worse. But we haven't talked about the rib flare. Now with the rib flare, you want to assess where your rib flare is. Some people may just have a one-sided rib flare. That can happen for various reasons. Maybe you always carry the baby on one side, and so you have a flare coming out this way. Whatever it may be, but oftentimes from pregnancy, sometimes the baby sat more on one side than the other. You just might have some sort of uneven rib flare. If you have a rib flare on one side, this is a great exercise, because let's say my rib flare is on my right side. I can do a plank this way, and this whole entire side is going to get core activation, so you can focus on the rib flare that's on this side. So if you have a right rib flare or a left rib flare, you just basically, whichever side you have the rib flare, that side should be facing down when you're doing the side plank, okay? It's a wonderful exercise for that. You'll see that in a lot of my videos, but you want to make sure that you have that good alignment, nice tall posture, and that you're not letting your shoulder sag down.